A man recently released from prison after serving time for terrorism-related offenses strapped on a fake bomb and stabbed two people on a busy London street over the weekend before being shot to death by police. Joining me now to talk about it is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari. Lisa, police have identified the attacker as 20-year-old Sudesh Aman. He was convicted in the past of publishing graphic terrorist videos online. Weren't police not really keeping tabs on this guy?
Right. Well, they were, and that's why he was apprehended to begin with. That's why he was serving time. But, we have to take a look at the rate of these terrorists going right back to terrorism the minute they get out of jail. In the United States, we even have a pattern of these individuals being radicalized in jail or prison, and then coming out and wanting to launch these types of attacks, let alone, those individuals who are going into these establishments with these convictions, with these feelings that are, anti, European or anti-American, in this case, anti-Canadian, in your case, anti-Jewish. This guy was actually serving time for dispersing material that was pro-jihadist and anti-Semitic in nature. And then as soon as he gets out, I think it was a week or so, he goes and launches this type of attack. Only 20 years old. This will, again, raise a lot of eyebrows in the UK, because I know in the past when there were attacks of this nature, they committed themselves to taking a look at time served and those individuals, and they would be back on the streets. Would they be more keen to commit these acts once again? Well, the answer is, in this case, yes, and that this should become a priority for those, like you said, keeping tabs on these terrorists who do not change their ways when they're serving time. They're on the streets. If they're committed to this ideology, it does not go away. It does not get cured. And I think that's the sad part about this whole story, is that this guy was flagged, he was captured, and he was able to do it once again.
Unbelievable. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Quds Force has a new commander at the helm, Lisa. He is 62-year-old Ismail Qani, the successor to General Qasem Soleimani, who was killed by a U.S. drone strike on January 3rd. Now, what do we know about the new leader? And is he planning attacks on various cities here in North America?
Well, he has already threatened the United States to be Qasem Soleimani's avenger, to carry out attacks all throughout the region on U.S. assets. And the U.S. retaliated with a similar threat to say, well, if there should be bloodshed, if there should be an attack or attacks similar to those that Qasem Soleimani was launching, well, then he will serve, or he will face the same fate that Qasem Soleimani did. And that was the special envoy to Iran from the United States, Brian Hook. He issued that statement in response to Ghani's threat to attack the United States once again. The Iranian government, their MO over the last 40 years that they have been in power has been to flex their muscles and to threaten the world community about, exporting terrorists, and they have acted on that, right? You look at their support of Hezbollah in Lebanon and all throughout the Middle East, their support of the Houthi rebels in Yemen, their support of Bashar al-Assad's regime in Syria, in Iraq. All over, they support terrorist bombings and suicide bombers and terrorist groups. And they will do it once again. But when they issue these types of threats, we know that they have not changed any of their behavior. On the other hand, they are trying to get a nuclear deal or some sort of deal in order to normalize relations with the international community, particularly for trade, and to get the sanctions removed. And they are begging the EU, more specifically than others, to get into a deal to maintain their trade relationship, but they can't have it both ways. And the bottom line is that if they're not willing to change their ways, they will not have these relationships. They will not have the sanctions removed. They will not have the normalizing of relations. The good news for the world community is that this new leader, Ghani, who is the successor of Qasem Soleimani is no Qasem Soleimani. There was no one like Qasem Soleimani. He was the shadowy commander. He was so difficult to pinpoint. He was smart and sharp, and he was brutal. He ordered the assassination of leaders and the attacks on groups and individuals and civilians. He was gruesome. He would not stop at anything to carry out his agenda. And I think this guy, he can try to be his successor, but I don't think he has that clout both at home and in the region.
An Al Qaeda branch has claimed responsibility for the U.S. naval base shooting. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, this is very interesting because, when we have an attack like this on U.S. soil, the first thing that the media tries to figure out is, A, is it a terrorist attack? And if so, let's call it a lone wolf attack. This guy is operating on his own, a single guy. He could have been crazy. He could have been stressed out. It could have been workplace violence. It could have been any one of those reasons. And then when we realize that it is, in fact, terrorism, the bigger news here is that it's not only terrorism, but it was ordered by a bigger group like Al Qaeda or like ISIS that we've seen in other cases. This guy was part of the military in Saudi Arabia. He was training here in the United States on a naval base, and to have this kind of attack happen again on U.S. soil, it wakes us up to the fact that not only are our enemies or these extremists operating on our assets abroad, they have embedded themselves or found ways to embed themselves here, in the West, whether it's in the United States or Canada or in Latin America. They have embedded themselves in assets that are close to home, and I think that that's what is the wake-up call here, is that they were able to infiltrate and radicalize an individual who was serving, in the Saudi military, to not only turn on the Saudis, but to turn on the U.S. As well. And I think people watching this will say, what do you mean turn on the Saudis? Saudis are the ones who support Al Qaeda. Yes, they support Al Qaeda to do their dirty work abroad, but not internally. And here we have a case in which this individual was operating not for Saudi Arabia, but for Al Qaeda and against the United States. This is a pure act of terrorism, and it was ordered and directed from above.
Lisa, Israel has launched more strikes on Gaza after rockets were originally launched at Israel. Now, there's a report that Gaza terror groups are fearing retaliation from Israel after the rocket attacks, and Islamic Jihad leaders have actually gone into hiding.
Well, this is business as usual in that part of the world. You have, it's like Gaza is like the little bullies that come in and kind of throw the first punch and then go into hiding because they know that the stronger and the stronger opponent will retaliate after many, many times of not retaliating or retaliating on a lesser scale and not in a proportionate way. This will cause Israel to obviously step it up and to shut them down once and for all. You can't give your neighbor's land and then have them use that land to launch attacks against your civilians. It's just no sovereign nation would stand for that. And when they are launching these types of attacks from Gaza, yes, they're going into hiding because they know what kind of beast they're awakening within Israel. Israel has the military capability, they have the technological capability, they have the intelligence, and they will use all of that to retaliate to keep their citizens safe. And I think that's the bottom line, is that when Israel goes back to their daily lives, these individuals go back to planning the next attack, and that's a reality for the individuals living in Israel, and especially on those border towns that are very close to Gaza.
The death toll from the Novel coronavirus is now around 400, with more than 17,000 people infected around the world, most in China. So far, there have been 4 confirmed cases here in Canada, and a 9th case of the virus has now been confirmed where you are in California.
Just in California, right. It's scary. It's scary because it's just a virus. It's just like catching the flu. It's obviously very highly contagious. And the symptoms, from what I am reading, are not so pronounced. So those individuals being affected have already passed and spread that virus before even knowing that they are contaminated with that virus. Here in California, you see many, many people walking throughout the streets and on public transportation with masks on. They're encouraged to do so because again, from what we're reading, the virus is large in size, and the masks do prevent to a high degree of protection from the virus. That death toll keeps climbing, and it's extremely scary. This is higher than we've seen in the SARS virus in the past, because it has spread to places all over the world. I mean, I'm reading it's in the Philippines, it's in Russia. They're closing down, transportation means of transportation between these places and China. And my sister is actually a medical resident, an internal medicine resident in Riverside, California, where a plane load of them arrived, and they're obviously being quarantined and checked and everything like that. But this is scary. It's scary because when you know that it's around you and you know that how quickly these things can spread, you don't want to be the next patient who catches this. So people are encouraged to be very vigilant, particularly when traveling, particularly when they're around people from that part of the world who have recently arrived, and we should take all the precautions we can. And it's flu season. People are told to be vigilant regardless, but all the more so this year.
I remember 2003 when I moved my family from Alberta to Ontario and the Greater Toronto area just in time for the blackout and SARS. I'm like, welcome to Southern Ontario, right? But one thing I did notice is that Chinatown in Toronto, because of SARS, was a ghost town. And a lot of people wouldn't give their business to a lot of the Chinese restaurants around. There was a lot of racism, discrimination. Are you seeing any of that at restaurants where you are?
Well, very interesting that you said this, because yesterday I went into the nail shop to get a manicure, and the woman who runs the shop is a woman who is from Vietnam, and she said to me, "I feel very badly, but two Chinese women walked in here, and I told them that I'm busy, that I don't have time to see them." And she said, "I am busy, but I particularly didn't want to see them because you never know, and I have two young kids at home, and I just didn't want to give them service." And it was interesting to hear that, because since when do we refuse service just because of somebody's, place of origin or their nationality, etc. This is something that people are extremely scared about. They are, this can spread so quickly that they're trying to, stay away from people. And as you said, it's causing them, a hit in their businesses. Not only that, it made a major hit in the Chinese stock market. Their businesses are already being hit by the tariffs that are put on China from the US. But in addition to the tariffs, they were off for the New Year, for the holiday, and they were supposed to come back today. Monday was the first day they were going to be back from the holiday, and their market took a 9% hit. So these are major financial hits or penalties to be paid for this. And look, it's not a good time for the Chinese, let's just say that. But like you said, it's not just in China, it's here as well. There is this disease is being spread. I think people are taking all the precautions they can, and that turns people into, to judge based on people's nationality, and to not serve them and not to give them business and not go near their communities, unfortunately.
After years of Brexit turmoil, Britain has finally left the European Union. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson says the UK will prosper as a result. He has set out tough terms for EU talks.
Finally, that Brexit went through, right? How we've been talking about it for such a long time. And, it was something that we almost, in this path to Brexit, we almost forgot what the initial reasons for Brexit were. We came such a long way, and there was such a fear of walking away from the EU, that they would lose business, that they would lose their trade partners with neighboring countries, for example, and the list goes on. But now that it has gone through, you have Boris Johnson, who is obviously a very large proponent of cutting ties with the EU, and he feels that very strongly that this will be something, a very positive step for the UK in terms of the economy and in terms of national security. Let's see. I mean, look, the proof is in the pudding, right? Let's see how the UK will prosper, if they will prosper, and how significantly they will prosper after turning their backs on the EU. What will the EU do in that case? How will they step it up? How will they kind of fill this void in both in intelligence, in national security, in the economy, in trade partners, etc. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this lands. I think there will be a lot of questions and a lot of uncertainty at first that will result in us seeing that in a tangible way. But in the long run, I think Boris Johnson's onto something.
So how will this actually weaken the European Union, as many suggest, if at all?
Well, in terms of tying themselves back to the UK, in terms of trade, obviously that's, I think, the number one. And then if countries have the choice, will they stay with the UK or will they stay with the EU? It's almost like a bitter divorce. Who will they stay with, right? And the UK carried most of that clout. Another thing to remember is that while the rest of the European Union has gone far, far left, UK had a swirl of that with some individuals trying to take it in the parliament, trying to take them further left, but they brought themselves back to center for many reasons. And I think one of them, again, being the two reasons, main reasons, are the economy and national security, trying to stay on top of their intel, not letting the lax attitudes of immigration and intelligence gathering, and again, the economy of the far left individuals in Europe bring them down. I think that they want to bring themselves back to center. If you remember, we would have that conversation very often. This is an analysis on the the world as a whole, to say that Brexit was a precursor to the Donald Trump election, Donald Trump winning the presidency here in the United States. And when you look at that, that is a reset in world order. People saying we're sick and tired of the status quo and we want something different. And when you look at Brexit, that was the initial reason for the UK to say we don't want to be tied to an acronym to bring us down. We don't want to be tied to a body that is meaningless, that does not do anything for us, it does not bring us up, it does not help us with more economic opportunity, that does not help us with intelligence, that has a lax attitude about letting migrants in and allowing those migrants to bomb them and kill them. Well, it's interesting because we had that story about London, right? So I think the UK needs to step up its abilities as well to crack down on these incidents as well. But I think, overall, I think these were the main reasons that led to Brexit. It wasn't in vain, and it wasn't just an idea that popped into someone's mind. I think the reasons were brewing, and I think now that they have their Brexit, they will have to prove to all the naysayers and the proponents about how this will work, how it will benefit the UK, how it will benefit their economy, and what they will do to thrive and to show that this was for the best for their both their economy and their security back at home.
Our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, joining me once again from Los Angeles. Thanks again, Lisa.
My pleasure.